The day had started like any other for the millionaire, who had built his life on strict routines and careful planning. His mornings were always busy, filled with meetings, calls, and endless decisions. But today something unusual had happened. He had finished his work earlier than expected, with no urgent meetings or calls scheduled for the rest of the day. For the first time in months, he felt a strange sense of freedom. Instead of heading to a cafe or a quiet corner of his office to spend the afternoon, he decided to go home early. It was a spontaneous choice, almost impulsive, and it gave him a slight thrill. He liked surprises, but usually they were in the form of business deals or travel plans, never something at home. As he drove through the familiar streets toward his neighborhood, he noticed how calm the day seemed. The sun was warm, filtering through the leaves of the trees that lined the road. The usual sound of traffic was present but muted, as if the world itself had slowed down just for him. He took a deep breath, appreciating the peace, and began thinking about what he might do once he reached home. Perhaps he would relax in his study with a cup of tea, maybe call an old friend, or just enjoy the rare silence of an empty house. When he pulled into the driveway, something felt off. There was a sound that he did not expect: laughter, voices, and a faint echo of music. Normally, the house was quiet during the afternoons. His domestic help had routines, and everything in the house ran like clockwork. He frowned slightly, puzzled by the unusual noise. He put the car in park and listened carefully. The laughter was light and genuine, not the kind of noise that came from children playing or neighbors outside. It came from inside his home. Curiosity mixed with a touch of apprehension as he stepped out of the car. He walked slowly toward the front door, trying not to make a sound. He noticed the door was slightly ajar, something that never happened unless he or his staff had intentionally left it open. The closer he got, the clearer the sound became. It was unmistakably a small group of people inside, talking and laughing in a way that made the house feel alive and unfamiliar at the same time. He paused just outside, his mind racing. What could be happening inside? Were they having some kind of celebration? Had something gone wrong? 1,000 scenarios ran through his mind, each one more improbable than the last. He knew his staff well. They were diligent, respectful, and always careful not to upset him. Yet here they were, breaking every rule he had set for the household. The thought made him feel a mixture of anger and curiosity. He took a deep breath and pushed the door open slowly, trying to see what was happening without startling anyone. What he saw made him freeze. His living room, usually pristine and silent during the afternoons, had transformed into a lively space. There were several people gathered there, some standing, some seated on the sofas and chairs, and a few even sitting on the floor. The staff members he knew so well were in the middle of the group, laughing and talking with neighbors he didn't recognize. The room smelled faintly of food, and small plates and glasses were scattered around. It was a scene of chaos and warmth all at once, completely different from the quiet, orderly home he had left behind that morning. For a moment, he simply stood there, unsure how to react. His initial impulse was to scold them, to demand an explanation for the intrusion into his home and the disruption of his rules. But as he looked closer, he noticed something else. None of the staff seemed nervous or guilty. Instead, they were calm, even happy, as if they had done something right. Their smiles were genuine, and the people around them seemed comfortable and at ease. It was not a party in the usual sense. There was no loud music, no reckless behavior, no disrespect. It was something different, something he had not expected at all. He stepped further into the room, trying to make his presence known without causing panic. The laughter stopped for a brief moment as people turned toward him, but it was not fear he saw in their eyes. There was respect, yes, but also a quiet hope that he would understand. One of his domestic staff members, who had been arranging some food on the table, came forward quickly. She looked at him with a mix of nervousness and determination, and he could see she wanted to explain before he reacted. The millionaire's mind was spinning. How could this happen under his roof without his knowledge? He had always been a person who valued control and order, and yet here was a situation completely out of his control. He realized that whatever was going on, he would have to approach it carefully. He could not simply assume the worst. He had to listen first. He took a step back, allowing himself to observe the scene more clearly. The people in the room were not strangers in the sense of being unwelcome. They were part of the community, neighbors and friends who had been invited for some reason. The domestic help, usually reserved and quiet, were at the center, guiding and coordinating the gathering. There was laughter, yes, but it was kind and comforting, not reckless or disrespectful. The atmosphere was warm, filled with a sense of purpose that the millionaire could not immediately understand. His initial frustration began to fade, replaced by curiosity. Why had this happened? What had prompted his staff to organize such a gathering? He could see their efforts, the way they moved around, attending to everyone, making sure the food was ready, that everyone felt welcome. It was clear they had invested time and energy into this event, and it was not for personal amusement. Something had prompted them to take this initiative, and he was determined to find out what it was. He cleared his throat gently, and the staff member stepped forward. She spoke quickly but clearly, explaining the situation. The elderly neighbor, she said, had fallen ill that morning and had no immediate family to help. They had noticed the situation and, without waiting for orders, decided to take action. They invited other neighbors and friends to provide meals, support, and care for the woman, using the resources available in the millionaire's home. What he had walked into was not a party but a coordinated effort to help someone in need. The millionaire felt a wave of emotions wash over him. Surprise for sure, but also admiration and even a little guilt. He had been ready to scold his staff, to remind them of rules and schedules, but instead they had shown initiative, compassion, and responsibility. They had acted with empathy and intelligence, using their judgment in a way he had rarely allowed them to. In that moment, he realized that trust was more important than strict rules, and that sometimes people could surprise you in the most extraordinary ways. He walked further into the room, feeling a growing warmth in his chest. The staff member smiled, relieved, and the other neighbors nodded respectfully, grateful for his understanding. The atmosphere shifted, no longer tense or uncertain, but filled with quiet pride and satisfaction. The millionaire looked around the room, seeing the small details, the neatly arranged plates, the careful attention to every guest, the laughter that was soft and genuine. It was a scene of kindness and community, something he had not expected to witness in his controlled, orderly life. As he stood there, he realized that this unexpected early return had given him more than a few hours of free time. It had given him a lesson in humility, trust, and the power of initiative. His staff had acted with their hearts, not out of obedience or fear, but out of genuine care for another human being. It was a moment that challenged his assumptions and reminded him that life was full of surprises, many of which could teach more than any business meeting or careful plan ever could. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to relax, to take in the scene without judgment. He noticed the laughter, the chatter, the small acts of care that made the gathering special. He realized that his home, usually so quiet and controlled, could also be a place of warmth, of human connection, and of meaningful action. The thought filled him with a sense of gratitude, not only for the staff but for the unexpected moments that life sometimes offered. The afternoon stretched on, and the millionaire remained in the room, observing and absorbing. He began to see the value of what had happened, not in terms of rules broken or schedules disrupted, but in terms of human connection, compassion, and the small ways in which people could make a difference. The domestic help had not only helped the elderly neighbor, but had also reminded him of the importance of empathy, trust, and the simple joy of seeing people come together for a good cause. He finally took a deep breath, feeling a calm that he had not felt in years. The house, once a symbol of control and order, had become a place of learning, reflection, and human warmth. He realized that this unexpected visit had changed his perspective, teaching him a lesson that no meeting or financial success ever could. And as he looked around at the smiling faces, he knew that his early return home had been a gift, a rare moment that would stay with him for the rest of his life. The millionaire stood in the middle of his living room, still trying to process what had just happened. The laughter had quieted down now, replaced by a low murmur of conversation. He could feel the warmth in the room, the kind of warmth that comes from people being together for a reason bigger than themselves. For a moment, he allowed himself to simply watch. The domestic help moved gracefully around the room, checking if everyone had what they needed, offering drinks, and making sure the small children were comfortable. It was a side of them he had never truly seen before, a side full of compassion, responsibility, and initiative. He took a few steps forward, trying to absorb the full picture. One of the neighbors, an elderly woman, smiled at him warmly, She was clearly familiar with his staff, and there was a sense of mutual respect between them. He realized that while he had been busy running his empire, these people had quietly built connections in the community, bonds that he had never paid attention to. It was humbling to see the way his staff interacted with the guests, not as subordinates but as equals, capable of leadership and decision-making. The staff member who had first approached him noticed his calm gaze and took it as an opportunity to explain further. She told him that the elderly neighbor had been unwell for a few days, but no one had realized how serious it was until that morning. She described how she and the others had quickly organized a small support system, bringing food, water, and even arranging a temporary resting place for the woman in a quiet room of the house. What the millionaire initially thought of as chaos was actually careful planning, a coordinated effort to provide help efficiently and thoughtfully. He listened intently, letting every word sink in. His first reaction of surprise and confusion was slowly being replaced by admiration. He realized that he had underestimated the intelligence, initiative, and empathy of his staff. They had acted on their own, without waiting for instructions, showing not only competence but also a deep sense of humanity. The thought filled him with a mix of pride and humility. These were people who had been part of his household for years, yet he had never truly seen the extent of their capabilities. As he moved closer, he noticed small details that made the situation even more remarkable. Plates of food were neatly arranged on the dining table, each dish labeled carefully so that everyone knew what they were eating. Drinks were served in small, clean glasses, and the children had their own designated area, with soft cushions and toys. There was no mess, no sign of carelessness, just a quiet, thoughtful arrangement that reflected the effort put into helping the elderly neighbor. The millionaire felt a sense of awe at the level of care and attention to detail his staff had shown. He approached the domestic help, who had first explained the situation. Her eyes met his, calm but alert. He could sense the nervousness she felt, but also her determination to make him understand. She spoke quietly, explaining how they had coordinated with neighbors, ensuring that someone was always present to check on the elderly woman. They had even arranged for basic medications and a small first aid kit to be readily available. The millionaire realized that what he had walked into was not just an act of kindness, but a demonstration of problem-solving, responsibility, and leadership. For a moment, he thought about how he had always viewed his staff through the lens of his own expectations. He had seen them as people who followed instructions, who completed tasks with precision, but he had never considered the depth of their initiative or their ability to handle situations independently. This realization made him pause and reflect on his own approach to leadership and trust. He understood that true leadership involved not just giving orders, but also allowing people the freedom to act, to think, and to make decisions that were guided by their hearts as well as their minds. As he stood there, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. The initial tension caused by his unexpected arrival faded completely. The neighbors smiled at him. The domestic help relaxed, and a sense of calm settled over the gathering. The millionaire felt a strange mixture of gratitude and humility. He had come home expecting quiet and order, yet what he found was a living example of community, kindness, and the human spirit. It was a lesson that went beyond wealth, schedules, and material success. He moved further into the room, engaging quietly with the neighbors. They spoke of the elderly woman, sharing stories and experiences, explaining how much the small acts of care meant to her. The millionaire listened, absorbing the details, and he felt a growing sense of connection, not just with the guests, but with his staff in a way he had never experienced before. They had acted out of genuine concern, not obligation, and it made him see them in an entirely new light. The staff member guiding the conversation noticed his interest and began showing him the arrangements they had made. She pointed out the temporary resting area set up in one of the guest rooms, the careful labeling of medications, and the small notes they had left with reminders for the elderly woman. The millionaire realized that they had thought of everything, leaving no detail unattended. It was impressive, not only in terms of logistics but also in terms of thoughtfulness and empathy. As the minutes passed, he observed the interactions around him. The children were playing quietly. The neighbors were engaged in meaningful conversations, and the staff moved with purpose, ensuring that everyone was comfortable. It struck him that this small act of care had transformed his home into a hub of human connection, a place where people came together not for entertainment or personal gain, but to support someone in need. The thought filled him with warmth, and he felt a deep sense of respect for those who had made it possible. He took a moment to speak quietly with one of the neighbors, asking about the elderly woman's condition and how long she had been feeling unwell. The neighbor shared more details, explaining that she had been struggling quietly and that the support organized by the staff had been a godsend. The millionaire realized that his staff had not only provided practical assistance, but had also given emotional support, creating a safe and comforting environment for someone who needed it most. The realization humbled him, making him see that wealth and status were not as important as compassion and human connection. As he reflected on the scene, he thought about his own life, the hours spent chasing deadlines, and the constant pressure to achieve more. He recognized that while success and financial stability were important, they were not the measure of true impact. The staff had demonstrated that small acts of care, guided by empathy and initiative, could create meaningful change in the lives of others. It was a powerful reminder that human actions, no matter how simple, could resonate far beyond what one might expect. He began to engage with his staff more directly, asking questions about their decisions and their plans for helping the elderly neighbor. They explained their thought process calmly and clearly, showing a balance of practicality and compassion. The millionaire listened, fascinated by their approach, realizing that he had much to learn from them. Their ability to take initiative, anticipate needs, and act decisively yet thoughtfully was a skill he had never fully appreciated, and it left him with a sense of awe. As the afternoon progressed, the millionaire found himself more involved than he expected. He helped arrange a few items, offered a few words of encouragement to the neighbors, and even assisted in preparing some light refreshments. It was a side of him that he rarely showed, the side that enjoyed participating in meaningful actions rather than simply observing or directing. The staff welcomed his help without hesitation, and together they worked to ensure that the elderly woman received the care she needed. By the time the evening approached, the initial chaos had transformed into a calm, organized scene. The elderly woman had been settled comfortably, the neighbors had been thanked and briefed on how to continue supporting her, and the staff had demonstrated their competence and dedication in every way. The millionaire felt a profound sense of gratitude and admiration for what had taken place. What had started as an unexpected surprise had turned into a deeply meaningful experience, one that challenged his assumptions and expanded his understanding of human capability. As he finally sat down, exhausted but content, he reflected on the events of the day. He realized that he had witnessed something remarkable, a demonstration of empathy, initiative, and leadership that had nothing to do with wealth or position. His staff had shown him the power of action guided by care and compassion, and it left a lasting impression on him. The room, once a place of strict order and rules, had become a testament to the strength of human connection and the impact of thoughtful action. He knew that this experience would stay with him forever, shaping the way he viewed his staff, his home, and the world around him. The millionaire could feel the weight of the afternoon slowly lifting as he observed the room. The laughter had turned into soft conversations, the kind that were warm and comforting rather than noisy. He noticed how seamlessly his domestic help interacted with everyone, guiding the neighbors and ensuring that each guest felt comfortable and cared for. Their attention to detail was remarkable. Plates were refilled as needed, drinks were poured, and small acts of care were done without anyone asking. The millionaire realized that what he had thought of as simple household staff were, in fact, extraordinary human beings with hearts capable of immense empathy. He wandered closer to the kitchen, where a small group of neighbors had gathered, chatting quietly and sharing stories. One of the staff members was showing them where utensils and condiments were, moving with an ease that spoke of confidence and familiarity. The millionaire stopped for a moment, just watching. There was a sense of harmony in the room despite the number of people and the unexpected nature of the gathering. He could see that his staff had created a balance, maintaining order while allowing warmth and spontaneity to flow. It was a skill he had rarely appreciated before. A young woman, part of the neighboring community, approached him with a smile. She explained that the elderly neighbor had been lonely and weak, unable to prepare her own meals and worried about her daily needs. She thanked him for allowing the staff to use his home to help, and he nodded, feeling a mix of pride and humility. His home had become more than a private space. It was a place where the community could come together and support one another. He felt a subtle but deep change in perspective. Wealth and comfort were important, yes, but they could serve a greater purpose when combined with compassion. He decided to move back into the living area, where most of the action was happening. He noticed small children playing quietly in a corner, guided by a staff member who had set up a soft play area with toys and cushions. The children laughed softly, their joy innocent and unforced. The millionaire smiled, realizing that even the smallest gestures of care could make a big difference. The staff had thought of everything, from safety to comfort to emotional support. Their foresight and empathy were remarkable, and he began to feel a sense of gratitude he had rarely experienced in his structured, controlled life. One of the neighbors leaned closer and whispered a story about the elderly woman, describing how she had spent most of her mornings in solitude, barely able to prepare a proper meal. The staff had coordinated with her and the community to ensure that she now had a reliable support system. The millionaire listened, struck by the thoughtfulness and dedication that had gone into this act. What had seemed like a disruption of order was actually an orchestration of care and human connection. The realization left him humbled and impressed. He moved to speak with the domestic help who had taken the initiative. She explained the steps they had taken that morning, detailing how they had identified the neighbors' needs, gathered resources, and organized assistance. It was clear that they had not acted recklessly. Every decision had been deliberate, every action measured. The millionaire marveled at their problem-solving abilities and sense of responsibility. They had done what he might never have imagined, used their initiative to create something meaningful, all without his instruction or oversight. The more he observed, the more he understood that this moment was about more than the immediate situation. It was about the trust, autonomy, and capability of those who worked with him every day. The staff had acted with courage and compassion, demonstrating leadership and empathy in a way that transcended their roles. The millionaire felt a shift in how he viewed his team. They were no longer just employees. They were partners in the broader human experience, capable of shaping events and improving lives. He walked slowly around the room, noting the small signs of care and attention everywhere. Chairs were arranged for comfort, blankets were available for anyone who felt cold, and the elderly neighbor had been given a cozy corner with pillows and soft lighting. Every detail reflected thoughtfulness and consideration. The millionaire realized that his staff had not just been problem solvers. They had been caretakers, creating an environment where everyone felt valued and supported. It was a skill and a quality that went far beyond any measure of efficiency or productivity. As he spoke quietly with another neighbor, he learned about the impact these actions had already had. The elderly woman who had been frail and isolated was now smiling, more at ease than she had been in days. Her eyes reflected relief and gratitude. The millionaire was deeply moved by this transformation. He saw that the efforts of his staff had not only met practical needs but had also provided emotional support, something that could not be measured in money or time alone. Their empathy and foresight had created a ripple effect, touching multiple lives in a meaningful way. The afternoon continued to unfold with quiet purpose. Conversations moved seamlessly from one topic to another, laughter and smiles appearing naturally. The staff continued to guide, support, and care for everyone, ensuring that the elderly neighbor was never left alone and that the environment remained organized and welcoming. The millionaire found himself drawn into the activity, offering assistance where he could and observing the interactions more closely. He was learning a valuable lesson about leadership, trust, and the power of initiative driven by compassion. He took a moment to reflect on his initial reaction when he arrived. He had been ready to scold, to reassert control, to demand order. Yet now he realized that the staff had done exactly what was needed. They had not sought permission. They had acted from understanding and empathy. Their actions had solved a problem, created community, and demonstrated responsibility far beyond what he had expected. It was a humbling realization, one that made him think deeply about his own approach to leadership and control. The staff noticed his attention and seemed to relax, seeing that he was not angry but curious and reflective. One of them spoke softly, explaining their thought process, and he listened intently. The more he heard, the more he appreciated the balance they had struck between initiative and care. They had anticipated needs, managed resources, and coordinated effectively with neighbors, all while maintaining a respectful and welcoming atmosphere. Their actions were a testament to their character and intelligence, and the millionaire felt a growing respect and admiration for them. He wandered further into the room, observing the environment as a whole. The balance between activity and calm, between care and organization, was impressive. The staff had created a space where people felt safe, supported, and comfortable. It was a living example of the power of empathy and thoughtful action. The millionaire realized that wealth and structure were important, yes, but they were nothing compared to the human capacity for care, initiative, and leadership. This understanding settled deep within him, leaving a sense of awe and gratitude. As the afternoon stretched into early evening, the atmosphere remained warm and peaceful. The elderly neighbor had been settled comfortably, neighbors had been briefed on how to continue their support, and the staff had demonstrated their competence and empathy at every turn. The millionaire felt a profound sense of connection to his staff, to the community, and to the simple, powerful acts of kindness that had unfolded before him. What had begun as an unexpected intrusion into his home had transformed into a powerful lesson about human capability and compassion. He finally took a quiet moment to himself, sitting on the edge of a sofa and watching the room. The laughter, now soft and natural, the gentle chatter and the small, meaningful gestures of care left a lasting impression. The millionaire realized that his home, a place he had always controlled so tightly, could be a space for connection, empathy, and human kindness. It was a lesson he would carry forward, one that would influence not just how he managed his household, but how he viewed the people around him and the power of compassionate action. As he reflected, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the staff who had taken initiative, for the neighbors who had participated, and for the unexpected moment that had allowed him to witness the extraordinary in the ordinary. He understood that true value was not measured in money or schedules, but in the impact of thoughtful, caring actions. And as he sat quietly absorbing the lessons of the day, he knew that this experience had changed him in ways that would last a lifetime. The millionaire sat quietly in the living room, reflecting on the events of the afternoon. What he had witnessed was far more than a simple act of kindness. It was a demonstration of initiative, compassion, and leadership in ways he had never considered before. The staff had acted decisively, thoughtfully, and with empathy, transforming his home into a hub of support for the elderly neighbor. He felt a growing sense of admiration for their courage and judgment. Their actions had challenged his assumptions about control and responsibility, and he realized that he had much to learn from them. As he watched, he noticed the subtle ways in which the staff continued to care for the people in the room. A young child reached for a cup of water, and one of the domestic help gently guided them, ensuring they didn't spill. Another staff member quietly handed a plate of food to the elderly neighbor, adjusting it carefully to make it easier for her to eat. Every gesture, no matter how small, was infused with thoughtfulness and attention. The millionaire felt a deep appreciation for the care they were showing, and he understood that these acts were far more meaningful than any chore or task he had ever assigned. He moved closer to the staff members, observing their interactions and listening to the quiet conversations. They spoke calmly, guiding the neighbors, coordinating tasks, and anticipating needs. The millionaire realized that their ability to act independently, without instructions, reflected a rare combination of intelligence, empathy, and responsibility. It was clear that they had thought of every detail, from comfort to safety to emotional support. Their actions were a testament to their character and the strength of human initiative when guided by care. The elderly neighbor, now more comfortable and relaxed, smiled as she looked around the room. She expressed her gratitude softly, and the millionaire felt a warmth in his chest that he had rarely experienced. The staff had not only met her practical needs, but had also provided her with a sense of security and community. He noticed how she looked at each staff member, not as employees, but as individuals who had genuinely cared for her well-being. The millionaire realized that this was the true power of compassion, the ability to touch lives in ways that went far beyond material assistance. He continued to observe the room, taking note of the small details that made the environment so welcoming. Cushions were arranged for comfort, blankets were available for those who felt cold, and the children had a quiet corner where they could play safely. Every aspect of the room reflected thoughtfulness and care. The millionaire understood that his staff had created more than a temporary gathering. They had built a space where people felt valued, respected, and supported. It was a rare quality, one that went beyond their assigned roles and responsibilities. The neighbors, too, seemed to sense the effort that had gone into organizing the gathering. They moved with ease, conversing quietly and participating in small acts of care themselves. The millionaire noticed the sense of community that had formed, a network of support and empathy that extended beyond his home. He realized that his staff had facilitated not just assistance for the elderly neighbor, but also connections between people, fostering relationships that would last beyond the afternoon. It was a powerful lesson in how small acts of care could ripple out and create broader impact. He approached one of the domestic help members to ask about the planning. She explained calmly, detailing how they had identified the neighbor's needs, gathered resources, and coordinated with others in the community. The millionaire was impressed by their foresight and the balance they had struck between organization and empathy. They had acted with precision and care, demonstrating problem-solving skills and emotional intelligence that were extraordinary. He began to realize that leadership was not just about giving orders or maintaining control. It was also about trust, empowerment, and allowing people to act responsibly on their own. As he listened, he thought about his own approach to managing his household and his business. He had always valued control and efficiency, but he now understood that there was a deeper form of effectiveness, one rooted in empathy and initiative. The staff had shown him that people, when trusted and guided by care, could achieve remarkable things. Their actions had created positive outcomes that he could never have orchestrated alone, and he felt both humbled and inspired by what he had witnessed. The afternoon continued with quiet activity, each moment filled with purpose and consideration. The elderly neighbor rested comfortably, the children played safely, and the staff maintained a calm, organized environment. The millionaire noticed how their leadership had created a sense of harmony, allowing everyone in the room to feel supported and included. It was a rare and beautiful example of human collaboration, one that left a lasting impression on him. He took a moment to speak with another neighbor, who expressed appreciation for the staff's thoughtfulness and dedication. The elderly woman, he learned, had been struggling with daily tasks and had felt isolated. The support provided by the staff and the community had made a profound difference, offering both practical assistance and emotional comfort. The millionaire felt a sense of fulfillment, understanding that true value lay in the impact of compassionate action rather than in wealth, status, or control. The staff noticed his engagement and seemed encouraged by his interest. They shared their reasoning, explaining how they had balanced the needs of the elderly neighbor with the resources available and the comfort of the guests. The millionaire listened attentively, impressed by the careful consideration that had gone into every decision. Their actions reflected not only intelligence and competence, but also a deep sense of humanity. He realized that this was a form of leadership he had never fully appreciated, the ability to guide, support, and make meaningful decisions with empathy at the center. As evening approached, the atmosphere in the room remained warm and peaceful. The elderly neighbor was settled comfortably, the children had been attended to, and the neighbors had been thanked and briefed on how to continue support. The millionaire felt a profound sense of connection, not only to his staff but to the broader human community that had come together in his home. He recognized that the impact of these actions extended far beyond the immediate situation, touching lives and creating bonds that would endure. He reflected on his initial arrival and the surprise he had felt. What he had first thought of as disorder and chaos was, in fact, a display of initiative, empathy, and thoughtful action. The staff had acted with courage and care, solving problems and creating harmony without waiting for instruction. The millionaire understood that their actions had demonstrated qualities far beyond obedience or routine. They had shown leadership, creativity, and compassion. It was a lesson in humility and perspective, reminding him that true value was found in human connection and meaningful action. He continued to move through the room, observing and absorbing the environment. The balance between calm and activity, between care and organization, was remarkable. Each gesture, each interaction reflected thoughtfulness and a genuine concern for others. The millionaire felt a deep respect for the staff, realizing that their actions had taught him more about empathy, leadership, and human potential than any book or seminar ever could. They had demonstrated that small, meaningful acts could have a profound impact, creating ripples of care and support that extended beyond the immediate moment. As he reflected quietly, he noticed the subtle ways in which his own presence had been integrated into the gathering. The staff welcomed his participation, allowing him to assist in small ways without taking over. He realized that he could contribute meaningfully while still allowing them to lead, a balance that reflected trust, respect, and collaboration. The experience was reshaping his understanding of relationships, leadership, and the power of compassionate action. The evening drew on, and the atmosphere in the room became calm and serene. The elderly neighbor rested peacefully, the children were content, and the neighbors prepared to leave with smiles and gratitude. The millionaire felt a profound sense of fulfillment and admiration for the staff who had made this possible. Their initiative, empathy, and careful planning had created a space of connection, support, and humanity. He understood that this experience had changed him, offering lessons in humility, trust, and the true meaning of leadership. As the last guests departed and the room settled into quiet, the millionaire took a moment to appreciate the efforts of his domestic help. They had acted independently, thoughtfully, and with great care, creating an environment where people felt valued, supported, and connected. He realized that their actions reflected not just skill and competence, but also integrity, compassion, and courage. It was a powerful lesson in the human capacity for care and the importance of trust, one that would influence him for the rest of his life. The millionaire sat quietly on the edge of his sofa, the room finally settling into a peaceful calm. The elderly neighbor had been made comfortable. The children were content and calm, and the last of the neighbors were preparing to leave. The staff, who had orchestrated the entire gathering, were finishing up small tasks with care and attention, ensuring that everything was left in order. As he watched them, he felt a sense of awe and gratitude that he had rarely experienced. Their actions had turned an ordinary afternoon into a moment of profound connection and human kindness. He reflected on the journey of the day, from the initial surprise of his early return to the unfolding understanding of what had taken place. What had seemed like an intrusion or disruption was, in fact, an extraordinary demonstration of initiative, empathy, and leadership. His staff had acted decisively, thoughtfully, and compassionately, creating a safe and welcoming environment for everyone. They had balanced the needs of the elderly neighbor, the comfort of the children, and the smooth interaction with neighbors in a way that was seamless and remarkable. The millionaire realized that he had learned a valuable lesson in trust. He had always thought of control as the key to maintaining order and achieving results, but he now understood that trust could unlock capabilities far beyond what control ever could. By allowing his staff to take initiative, they had not only solved a problem but had created a meaningful impact that extended beyond the walls of his home. The experience reshaped his understanding of leadership, showing him that guidance and support, rather than strict control, could produce extraordinary results. He moved around the room, observing the small acts of care that continued even as the day drew to a close. One of the staff members gently adjusted a cushion for the elderly neighbor, making her more comfortable. Another picked up a toy that had fallen and handed it back to a child with a warm smile. Every action, no matter how small, was infused with intention and empathy. The millionaire realized that these gestures were the essence of what made the day special. Human kindness expressed through thoughtful action. He approached one of the staff members who had taken the lead in organizing the gathering. She spoke quietly, explaining how they had managed the logistics, coordinated with the neighbors, and ensured that everyone's needs were met. The millionaire listened carefully, appreciating the clarity and foresight in their explanation. He could see the intelligence, responsibility, and empathy that guided their decisions, and he felt a deep respect for the way they had handled everything without direction or supervision. Their actions were a testament to the strength of character and the power of thoughtful initiative. The elderly neighbor, now resting comfortably, looked up at him and smiled with gratitude. The millionaire felt a warmth in his chest as he saw the relief and comfort in her eyes. He realized that the day had been about more than organization or efficiency. It had been about creating a space where people felt valued, cared for, and supported. The staff had provided not just practical assistance but also emotional comfort, fostering a sense of connection and belonging. It was a reminder that true impact came from understanding and responding to the human element in every situation. He walked over to the children, who were quietly playing in their designated corner. One of the staff members had ensured that their space was safe, comfortable, and entertaining. The children laughed softly, their joy infectious and natural. The millionaire smiled, realizing that even these small details reflected careful thought and genuine concern. His staff had considered every aspect of the gathering, ensuring that everyone from the youngest to the oldest felt included and cared for. It was a level of attention and empathy that left a lasting impression on him. As he reflected, he thought about his own life and the routines he followed so strictly. The day had shown him that control and schedules, while important, could never replace the value of initiative and compassion. His staff had demonstrated that people, when trusted and empowered, could achieve remarkable things. Their actions had created an environment of support and connection, transforming his home into a place of warmth and human care. The millionaire realized that this lesson in empathy and leadership was far more valuable than any business success he had achieved. He took a moment to speak with the remaining neighbors, thanking them for participating and expressing his appreciation for their involvement. They smiled warmly, acknowledging the efforts of the staff and the impact it had on the elderly neighbor. The millionaire felt a sense of fulfillment as he realized that this experience had strengthened not just individual relationships, but the bonds of the entire community. His home, usually a place of privacy and control, had become a center of connection and human care, guided by the thoughtful initiative of his staff. The staff continued their work quietly, ensuring that everything was in order before leaving for the evening. The millionaire watched them, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and admiration. Their actions had gone far beyond their daily responsibilities, demonstrating empathy, leadership, and the ability to act with intelligence and compassion. He understood that the true value of their work was not in completing tasks, but in the meaningful impact they had created. Their efforts had touched lives, fostered community, and reminded him of the importance of trust and empowerment. As the evening grew darker, the millionaire found a quiet moment to reflect on the lessons of the day. He realized that he had witnessed something extraordinary, the power of initiative guided by empathy. His staff had acted with understanding and care, creating an environment where people felt supported, valued, and connected. The experience had challenged his assumptions about control, leadership, and the capabilities of those around him. It was a lesson he would carry forward, shaping his approach to relationships, leadership, and human connection. He moved through the room one last time, observing the small details that made the experience remarkable. Cushions were arranged, blankets folded neatly, and the children's play area was tidy. The elderly neighbor was resting comfortably, a soft smile on her face. The neighbors had departed, leaving a sense of quiet satisfaction in the air. The millionaire felt a deep appreciation for the thoughtfulness, initiative, and care that had made this day possible. It was a moment that reminded him that true wealth was not measured in money or possessions, but in the ability to positively impact the lives of others. He approached his staff and spoke quietly. Expressing his gratitude and admiration, he acknowledged their initiative, their thoughtful planning, and their compassionate actions. The staff smiled, grateful for his recognition, and he felt a connection with them that went beyond employer and employee. He realized that their actions had created trust, respect, and a sense of partnership that was invaluable. The millionaire understood that he had learned a profound lesson in leadership, empathy, and human connection, one that would influence him for the rest of his life. The evening settled into a calm quiet, the house returning to its normal state. Yet the millionaire felt that something had fundamentally changed. He had witnessed the extraordinary in the ordinary, the power of thoughtful initiative, and the deep impact of compassionate action. His staff had shown him that human connection, empathy, and trust were far more powerful than control or routine. It was a lesson in humility, leadership, and the value of caring for others. As he finally sat down, reflecting on the events of the day, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The staff had not only helped an elderly neighbor, but had also taught him an invaluable lesson about life, leadership, and the human capacity for care. He knew that this experience would stay with him forever, shaping the way he viewed his staff, his home, and the world around him. The day had begun as an unexpected surprise, but it ended as a transformative experience that left a lasting impression on his heart and mind. He understood that the true richness of life came not from possessions or control, but from the meaningful connections we create and the care we extend to others.